Everyone, and welcome to week 1 of Death in London. Today we're going to be talking about liminality, ritual, and ancient practices. Now, death studies overall deals with one of the most liminal concepts in human society, that being death. Now, a liminal concept is any concept that makes you uncomfortable. So think about what makes you uncomfortable. Dirt inside of your house, a bug inside of your house, a dead animal, or anything that's out of place. Generally, it's considered that this makes you uncomfortable because it's crossed two borders. So, dirt inside of your house has crossed two spaces. It crossed from outside to inside, and it didn't do so properly. You didn't bring it into your home, nor did anyone else who has authority to bring it into your home. Therefore, you're uncomfortable with it. This makes it a liminal object, being that it is in between spaces as it has not properly crossed any space. Now, to deal with liminality, human societies across the globe have come up with various rituals and rites. Now, in sociology, a ritual is going to be anything that allows you to cross two spaces. Generally, we don't call them rituals in everyday life because that would make us uncomfortable and kind of defeat the entire purpose. So, common ones that you see in society today would be graduations, birthday parties, and funerals, of course. Rituals allow you to cross two spaces by undergoing a space of in-betweenness. So think about a graduation ceremony. You come in, everybody's all dressed the same, everybody's normed, they're all wearing black, whatever, white, depending on where you are. They all come in together, members of one group, and it'll be the last time that they're members of this group because they're using this ritual to leave this group. And then at the end, everything has changed. You treat them differently because they are no longer who they were when they entered. When you have your high school graduation, you come in a high schooler and you leave a high school graduate and ideally an adult. This lets you change from one space to the other, and pastimes generally mark the end of childhood. The most uncomfortable ceremonies that we have are funeral practices. These are uncomfortable because they allow you to move from life into death, and generally we don't enjoy that experience because nobody particularly wants to die. So think about your funeral practice. You come in, everyone is solid, everyone is together, and you have the corpse at the beginning. No. So funeral practices let us move from death to life, and it makes us generally more comfortable with the fact, or as comfortable as we can be with dying in modern society, because we don't really like to die. They never like to die, but we really don't like to die. This changes when there's a gruesome death. That's why murders make us more uncomfortable, because they're more liminal. We see this in ancient practice. So in ancient times, generally what they would do was when somebody was approaching death, they would separate them from the rest of society and they would let them die. After they let them die in ancient England, they would do what's called excarnation. Excarnation is where they deflesh the corpse and they take all of the flesh and put it into separate pots, kind of like the funeral urns of ancient Egypt. And then they would ritually arrange the bones in a nice pretty pattern at the end of the cairn. And the cairn is where they're going to be buried, and the cairn is going to be inside of what's called a long barrow. The long barrows are basically big hills that are massive crypts. They're pretty hard to spot in the English countryside because, well, they look like a hill, and the English countryside is massive amounts of hills. Other than that, we don't know much about the ancient practices. They kind of just buried their bones. They didn't really have a set concept because they didn't really have a set religion, and religion is what generally dictates our death practices today. You can, however, tell a few things. You can't tell ancient suicides because it hadn't been tabooed yet, but you can tell what members of society they were by what they were buried with. Their warriors were always buried with their weapons or their horses. Their womenfolk were often buried with their statues of their symbols of office. They were buried with their rod if they were a matriarch, or they would be buried with their children if their children died young. Let them be comfortable. Um, but that's really all we have for the ancients. The didn't really have much, and we don't really discover much about them. If you'd like to tune in next week for Romantic era and Victorian era practices on death, subscribe below and tune in next week.